Thank you for having us. Well, the last speaker was absolutely amazing, right? So we're going to do something a little bit different today. In a moment, we're going to introduce all our panelists here for this fireside chat. But this conversation is going to be a little bit less contrived. We're just going to have a conversation as if we're in our living rooms, as executives in the world, discussing some of the challenges that we face, and you guys get to hang out with us in our living room as we discuss. So before setting the context of the conversation, would you guys like to introduce yourselves? You first, ladies first.
Sure. Hello, I'm Elizabeth Tweedale. I'm the CEO of Coco Coders. We teach children between the age of 6 and 14 how to code using live online tutors. We write all of the content. My background is actually in AI and technology, having previously written AI that I've named ADRA in the dynamic resource allocation space for prop tech, built tech teams in the past, and have founded multiple businesses in AI and education.
Hi, I'm Dev Mukherjee. Currently, as you know, I'm teaching at a university, but I've been in industry for well over 20 plus years. Worked in the digital transformation space, data analytics, the precursors to AI, in advanced analytics. And I've seen change from, the good old days or the bad old days of mainframes, the dot-com, revolution, the big data revolution, now the cloud migrations and the cloud revolution that we're in, and right now the turbulence that we're seeing because of the advent of AI and ChatGPT and technologies like that. And I have first-hand experience in seeing how leadership at the top levels of organizations have changed. And what's needed, for all leaders like you and me who have to kind of lead organizations into the future. So I look forward to a pretty interesting conversation, and I'll let Brian, fire that off.
By the way, they have no idea what questions I'm going to ask. I hate sending questions beforehand, so this is going to be super random, I guess. And just so you guys know who I am, my name is Brian Tollaby. I was very fortunate. I started my career working at NASA building satellites to look at the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy. I started doing that when I was 16 years old. When I was 20, I started my first company. After building and selling a bunch of companies, I'm now working on my 7th company, which we built technology that enables people to learn 3 to 5 times faster than traditional education. We sell to corporations like Salesforce, Verizon, Mars. NASA uses our technology to train their rocket scientists. And I've spoken on many stages, the World Economic Forum, United Nations, NASA, Google, Microsoft, and a bunch of other places. So I want to set the context for this conversation. We live in a really interesting time. When I was speaking at NASA last, one of the things I shared with the audience is that we are probably in the most important point in time in not only human evolution, but all evolution on Earth. Because if you think about it, the last time we were in a time like this was when fish began walking on land. And now 2 things are happening. We're going from land to space. Within the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to have millions of people living permanently in space. But we're also moving towards a world where biological intelligence is merging with artificial intelligence. Now, one of the things that's happening right now as well that I've been talking about from stage since 2018, when everybody told me I'm insane, and I probably am a little insane, but we're living through the biggest labor disruption in human history. Now, this is what's called the 4th Industrial Revolution. The 1st Industrial Revolution was when farmers began working in factories. The 2nd Industrial Revolution was when factory workers started working in office buildings. And then the 3rd was the digital revolution, right? Here's the difference. In the 3 previous industrial revolutions, we had 1 to 2 generations to retrain the population for new jobs. It wasn't the farmers themselves that worked in factories, it was their children and their grandchildren. It wasn't the factory workers that had to learn to work in offices, it was their children and their grandchildren and so forth. This time, we have 5 to 10 years. According to the World Economic Forum and McKinsey and Gartner, we're set to lose 1 to 2 billion jobs in the world by 2030. And this is already happening. If you look in Amazon warehouses, it's all robots. If you if you go to San Francisco, Waymo is already in production. If you think of all the taxi drivers and truck drivers that are going to lose their jobs. If you look at Hollywood or marketing, many of the marketers are being replaced by people using AI to be 10 times or 100 times more productive. Right? And now it's affecting lawyers and engineers and doctors as well. So this is something we're living through right now. So the context of this conversation is, given that we're a whole bunch of C-levels working in the corporate ecosystem, how do we lead by example? Because the folks that are the most adaptable are the ones that win, and the ones that don't adapt to a changing landscape are going to go the way of Blockbuster and Nokia and other corporations that suffered the same fate. So let's turn to our panelists. You both have been in industry for a very long time, and I want you guys to start off by telling us what you're doing within your company and within your industry to lead by example for your team, but also within your industry to embrace artificial intelligence, to learn all the AI tools, to be able to use these emerging tools that most people don't even know exist in order to increase the profitability, increase the efficiency of your company. So whichever one of you guys wants to go first.
Do you want to go first? Okay, all right. That's a great question. You know, I think as a leader, as a C-level leader, you know, you're expected to lead by example. And I'm kind of really impressed by the fact that you mentioned Blockbuster. You know, so in a previous life, I actually led the Blockbuster attempted revolution to do what Netflix is doing today. I was a consultant, and I went in there and I spoke to them and I said, change is coming. You know, they have 5,000 plus stores all over the world, and in a flash, all those stores were replaced by Netflix because they could do video on demand. And they solved that problem. We tried hard. You know, there were 3 or 4 of us, which was the brain trust, you know, to kind of make that change. They didn't listen, or they couldn't change. And then they just went by the wayside. Viacom just spun them off, and they were nothing after a few years. So that taught me a big lesson, you know, that if I am going to be brought in, if I'm going to be a leader of a company that is on the verge of extinction, you know, what should I do? And one of the things that I focus on is something that, you know, I would like to discuss with you, get your thoughts on. I go from process to data to automation to AI. So what I look at is, where is my bread and butter? Where is it that I'm going to get the most bang for my buck? Where are my repeatable processes? Where can I do the most automation in the quickest amount of time? Where's the low-hanging fruit? And I start using automation and AI to focus on those areas. Once I've got the value, and I start beginning to see the value in doing that automation and the use of AI, I start focusing our energies in places that is not easily automated, which needs that human in the loop, like they were talking about just in the other panel. And having the human in the loop doing more creative work as opposed to doing the repeatable work is where I start focusing, you know, my energies. And I say, use AI in the processes that make my money. Let's see if I can use AI to replace those processes. Take the brain trust over to work on, you know, where the creativity and the innovation should be, and which AI cannot completely replace, but can augment, and I use AI as my superpower. That's what I do, you know, in terms of getting to, you know, implement AI.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. Thoughts?
For me, I teach children how to code. When I first started teaching kids how to code, I was the CTO of our AI company in prop tech, and I had 2 small children. We were living in London, which is a completely different education system than us here in the US, so that was already a big learning curve. But I saw what they were teaching in school, and I thought, there's something missing. So I sort of took it up as a side project and started teaching 6 boys how to code. These were the kinds of kids that would become programmers whether we helped them or not. They were like me, they were gamers, so pretty easy, straightforward. My next class that I taught was a class of 20 girls. Approached the problems in completely different ways and with a different mindset for asking questions, asking why, and having not been trained as an educationalist and in education, I became obsessed and fascinated. And so I had this kind of AI world and this tech world behind me, and then these kids that could accomplish more than people that were trained in education thought that they could. So coming back to, implementing AI, what I saw was that actually if we start from the very young ages and talk about technology in our lives and how that's affecting us psychologically, but also adapting to those changing things and being comfortable with it, we go a long way very quickly. One of my biggest impactful moments were when we would hold, camps, little camps. This is, the very early days, and parents would come and they were terrified. What are you teaching my kids? Did you say that they couldn't, that I couldn't use my phone at the dinner table? I was like, no, we just talk about technology, how it's interacting in our lives, and we're teaching them how to code. And that fear that I saw in the parents is something that really stuck with me. Then having built, companies, and specifically in education where there's only a couple of people on my team that are technical, but we train our teachers to teach kids how to code. A lot of them are, computer programmers or in university to become computer scientists, but most of them are just engaging humans that find this passion to pass on the knowledge of technology to other humans and engage with young people. But that fear, the fear that the parents have, is something that's also I've found in my team. So we're teaching children how to wield AI, how to write code, not so that they can become programmers. We don't need a world of little computer scientists. They need to be able to ask the questions and ask the AI how to write the code and realize what's wrong with it. But the most important thing is that most people are terrified. And so even just sitting with my content manager and saying, hey, why don't we just put all of the lesson plans that you've written over the last 6 months into ChatGPT, give it an idea and see what it spits out? And he's like, well, is that okay? I mean, I'm like, yeah, of course, let's just sit and do it together. So I think what I'm getting at is as a leader, understanding that technology is moving so quickly that our kids will understand more than we do. The young people that you're hiring will understand more than you do, but embrace that. Let's work together with them and say, show it to me. Let's figure this out together. Wow, you know a lot about this topic, or even just Google Analytics. I mean, it's all over the place, but accepting that we aren't going to be the most knowledgeable and that people are scared, I think was a huge step for me to just hold their hands a little bit and go on the ride.
That's awesome. That is hilarious. Well, especially since we have this mindset, right, where we think of kids as digital natives, and now there's an entire new generation that are going to be AI natives. And so what is that going to look like? I remember seeing, you guys all are in my generation, right? So you've seen kids at a restaurants or sitting at the side of the road with their phones out, and it's like, oh, kids are just staring at their phones all day. And then you look at news articles from back in the day, or the discussions from like 50, 60 years ago when people were just had newspapers in their hands, like, oh, these people are just staring at newspapers all day long. They're not engaging with each other. And there was a story about Socrates and Plato. They had an issue with papyrus, with paper. Because they were like, oh, back in our day, we would memorize hours of things, and these kids these days have to write them down. They're getting so lazy. Exactly. But I want to go to something you said in this. You were talking about Blockbuster and extinction of companies. So whether we like it or not, until proven wrong, every single company in the world right now is at an extinction point. And if we as leaders go through our day-to-day blasé, going from meeting to meeting, doing everything we're doing, we're going to suffer the consequences that many companies like Blockbuster and others have suffered before. Because every company in every industry can and will be transformed and disrupted by artificial intelligence. And so the question we have to ask is, are we going to be part of that transformation and transform our companies from inside and disrupt our companies from inside so that we're on top of it? Or are we going to let other new entrants do it for us? So you were talking about Blockbuster. I was very fortunate in that I got to sit down with the last CEO of Blockbuster. He happened to be on a board that I sit on as a space nonprofit. And so afterwards, we all went out for drinks. And so I was making fun of him a little bit. I was like razzing him about, losing the game. And he's like, no, I was brought in after we already were way behind to try to turn Blockbuster around and save it from this extinction. And he's like, you know what you've heard? It's a lot worse than that. I'm like, really? Because I've heard a lot. So we've all heard the stories, right, where the Blockbuster board and the executive team, this is before he joined, ran a study internally to find out why people like Blockbuster. This is when Netflix was already on board. They had rejected Netflix's offer to, be bought by Blockbuster. And the study came back and said, people just love going into Blockbuster, browsing movies, figuring out what they want to see, and then taking it and then bringing it back, which we all know is complete and utter nonsense, right? But their researchers, the people that did the study, knew what the board and the C team wanted to hear and gave them that. And so he's like, it's even worse than that. I'm like, tell me more. And he said that the team purposefully would stock very limited numbers of the newest movies, the ones that are most popular. Their hypothesis was when the new movies came out, and they only had 10 copies when they knew the demand was like 100 or 200, right? People would come in, see that the movie that they wanted is not available on Friday. They would go rent something else, and they would come back on Saturday to return it and get something else, so they would double their sales. That's literally what they thought. Now, it's really easy right now for us to laugh at that and say that's ridiculous.
I can see.
But I invite you guys, and I want to ask you, I invite you to think in the audience, and I want you guys to respond to this. How many of those similar kinds of mindsets do we have in our companies? Where we know that we are BSing ourselves, when we know we're lying to ourselves about the challenges that we face, but we choose to keep telling ourselves those lies because by bringing it up, it would cause a ruckus, it would cause disruption, it would cause people within the organization to be uncomfortable, right? So I'd love to jump back to you guys. So what are your thoughts? Like where are the most obvious examples of these?
Right.
And what can we do as an industry, as a society to go against this?
Yeah. Do you want to go or?
Sure. So for me, as we sort of discussed briefly before this, I don't like confrontation. I think being an entrepreneur is, we have this sort of go hard or go home, start out with this pile of optimism in the morning and then spend the whole day getting it slowly depleted out of you. So I even struggle looking at my competition, which I know is a weakness. However, that's why I bring people around me to fill in for those weaknesses. So I think what I'm getting at is that asking the hard questions is difficult, and at the same time, protecting yourself psychologically is also important. So coming around to AI, we have a lot of brainstorms where we have the team bring out all of the problems and situations and creating an environment where they feel like they can do that without being terrified. But I also do ask ChatGPT frequently about those weaknesses. So I think as a leader, being able to understand your own weaknesses, but also then call on either your team and the people that you build up around you to support you in those, or AI can be one way to approach this situation.
That's awesome. Great answer.
So the thing, the CEO who came over to take the spot at Blockbuster during this time of change was the ex-CEO of Taco Bell. And in the panel discussion yesterday, we were talking about, I think someone was saying that we should try and promote leadership from internally as opposed to external. And in this case, what they did was they wanted to cross-pollinate, from other industries. How does food industry kind of organize retail versus, video rental? IBM tried, the CEO of Nabisco to come over and re-engineer IBM's future. So I think we're at that moment, where we see, we talked about this frog in the boiling pot. For the last 20 years, the pot has been boiling, very slowly, and we feel the warmth. But in the last 2 or 3 years, it's gone to a simmer, it's gone to a boil, and and now what's happening is we need leadership to come in and make change, and you have this issue with the haves and the have-nots. And so the strategy that I saw, and I wanted to kind of share it with you and see if you agree, is you might have to do in the interim or in the beginning both things. Like, one of the things that I noticed was, I can say this for myself, and I'm an old timer. I came from the 20th century. Some of you most probably have been born in this century and don't really know the joys of going to a video store and spending hours on the weekend browsing. And Godfather, Taxi Driver, and you have this joy of social interaction with other people. You had popcorn to buy. You had, those, what is it, SAR, the SAR Patch Kids, thank you. And all that, there was a social thing, going to the movies. There was something to that. And that got replaced with me going on my computer and just downloading Netflix. So I think getting people, as a leader, trying to get people to the other side, needs a little bit of both. What would have been great in Blockbuster's example is if they had bought Netflix, and said, we'll do both. Yeah. When you're at home, you want to do downloads, you want to do video on demand, you're on the move, you're on your phone, do that. But if you want a social experience, you want the fireside chat, where you sit around, you sit inside a large Blockbuster store and you have thousands of videotapes, and you have this tactile experience. By the way, the current generation, the millennials and Gen Zs, are using, older, cameras. They're going back to the analog days. They're playing LPs. They're listening to Walkman, inspired digital, devices. And so I'm thinking that as a leader, you have to bridge, the old and the new. And I think that it takes a special kind of ability to do that. And I think the CEO of Taco Bell tried that, with a lot of resistance, and the rest is history. But, lessons to be learned.
Well, he did try, right?
Yeah,
he
did try.
He rolled out Blockbuster online, but it was too little too late, and they did have the opportunity to buy Netflix, and they didn't. Not to terrify everybody here, but switching to AI specifically. So I'm curious, how many people, by raise of hands, how many people here over the past year have been using one of the chat GPTs or Gemini or XAI? Okay, cool. How many of you have incorporated that technology into your core offering and your website already? Okay, that's way fewer hands. Now, guys, all those chat GPTs are so last year. If you, seriously, if you haven't already incorporated that into your website and into your core offering, you're already late. So you need to go home, talk to your engineering team. It takes literally 3 hours of coding time to
You can ask
incorporate the API.
ChatGPT how to do it.
That's true. It takes one coder 2 to 3 hours to incorporate their API into your platform. And I recommend XAI, by the way. It's way better than ChatGPT, and Sam's about to go to jail. XAI already is going way faster than ChatGPT. It took OpenAI 2 years to incorporate their first 100,000 H100 chips. It took Elon 19 days. Then they did the other 100,000, and now they have a contract for another 900,000 chips, of which somewhere around 100 to 200 have already been incorporated. So they have the most powerful AI cluster called Colossus, and it continues to grow, and it's going to be the Google of search, right? It's going to be the category defining product. So I recommend that, but the first homework assignment you have is to incorporate that because it can automatically provide value. But now if you want to be in the lead for 2025, the new thing, and I want you guys to speak on this, is agentic AI. Right. So here's the good news. The bad news is, obviously we've been talking about it, which is every company in this room and every company in the world is on the cutting edge of extinction. That's the bad news. The good news is there's less than maybe 1,000 to 5,000 people that are experts in all the AI tools that are emerging. This is where Bitcoin was in like 2011. How many of you guys would give anything to go back to 2011 and buy or steal, borrow, beg enough money to buy as much Bitcoin as you could, right? Any of us would do that in an instant. I think it was like 7 cents a Bitcoin or something. It was like $7. But right now, with agentic AI, we're in that moment. A lot of people think they're already too late. This is not true. We're scratching the surface of artificial intelligence right now. And so even if you come in now, you don't have to be like me and be in AI for 20 years. This is that point of inflection where AI is now rising. It's about to be vertical. And so if you go and learn how to use all the agentic AIs, and now what you can do is just go to XAI and ask it to teach you about agentic AI. It's super easy. I mean, you can use XAI to make a computer program in 3 minutes. You can tell it, hey, you remember that game that I used to play in the 80s with a rocket ship that shot asteroids? Create that. And instead of 1,000 lines of code in Pascal, it'll create it for you in 3 minutes. That's the power of XAI, which is why you should be using it. But agentic AI will allow these AI agents to work full-time on your behalf throughout the day. You can replace headcounts, or instead of hiring new people, instead of firing people, you can just bring in AI agents. So how does it work? Well, I know with my team, to share a concrete example, every one of my employees uses somewhere between 10 to 30 AI agents all day long. So the first thing they do when they wake up, instead of opening Facebook and Instagram to see who liked their posts on politics, they check to see what all the AI agents did while they were asleep, because they gave them directions. They give them new directions of what to do, and then they get up, brush their teeth, take a shower, drink their coffee, have breakfast, and they sit down. Now those AI agents have spent 2 hours doing their new tasks. They look at their tasks, give them new tasks, and then they sit down at their desk and go through all the work that they did overnight and over breakfast and fix anything, change the context, do whatever they need to, and give a new set of tasks. By the time they've told their 30th AI what to do, the first one's already completed its work. And so they're just generals in an army managing an army of AI agents, and they're 30 times more productive than the employee at the competitor company. These are the things that you can do. Now, the first thing to do is to learn about it, because gaining the knowledge enables you to figure out how to use these tools and technologies in your organization. And I know we're almost out of time, so I want you guys to share, with the minutes that we have left, the things that you think they should work on, or with specific tools in AI that you guys are incorporating into your technologies, or that you recommend other people look into.
Do you want me to go? Okay. So here's another really interesting example of what I just talked about. So this is, and I won't name this company, this is a global financial company, and it essentially struggled for 5 years to establish an optimization program for its claims processing. So you have an annuity with this organization, you'd go there, you would essentially say, hey, I have a claim, X, Y, and Z, and it would take them forever to give you that claim check, right? And what they had in the background were hundreds and hundreds of essentially data center workers, or call center workers, who would take those calls and essentially address these claim requests, which came in through agents in the field. And so they tried for 5 years to kind of optimize this. And we realized that this is where they were making the money, and this is where they were losing the money. This was like a major process for this financial company. And so the leader had to focus on essentially having an effective robotic process automation program, which we kind of ran. We came up with a business optimization model, used AI to figure out what was going on, and essentially bring the benefits to the organization. We reduced the cycle time to process the claims. We reduced the number of errors. We managed to train the call center representatives much faster. And this is where automation and AI can really, really help you. And I think as a leader, being able to do that, where you're not just providing tech, but you're providing strategy. Like, this is how you do it. That you don't become just a follower, but a leader. And you're going to see, I want to leave my comment with just one thing. 2023 and 2024 had the highest levels of C-level departures ever in the history of US. Ever. I repeat that. 2023 and 2024 had the highest levels of C-level departures. And the reason for that is because they have been ineffective in being able to execute the change that industry needs to stave off extinction. And doing things like this essentially saves time, saves money, gives you the leg up, that can help your company, help yourself, So that's what I had to say.
That's amazing.
My key takeaway, I think, is kind of coming back to that Blockbuster, Netflix. One of my businesses teaches children how to code in person. Now it's live online. People are like, well, you have two competitive businesses. No, it's kind of taking a big idea and applying it to different business models. So I think this is the same thing with AI. We're not too late. Starting small, using the same processes that we used back in the day, putting Post-its on a whiteboard, we can do that in the computer. Just jump in. I mean, whiteboard Post-its, Miro, same thing, but more collaboration. It's the same thing with building your AI agent army behind you. It's not replacing jobs. It's just taking baby steps and making us more efficient humans. But again, to my original story, it is terrifying. Even when you're in it, there's still so much unknown. So don't feel like you're too late, and don't feel like you're behind the curve, because we all are. Even when you're this guy over here, we're still all learning, and that's the most important thing. They're probably all getting fired, those C-suites, because they didn't jump in and embrace the technologies. So
Absolutely,
thank you.
and I hope we didn't. Well done, by the way. That was amazing. I hope we didn't terrify you too much. And a tiny piece of shameless self-promotion. At my company, where we train people 3 to 5 times faster, we work with government agencies, Fortune 100s, NASA. We also work with SMBs and all the way up. And our technology can be used to train entire teams, executive teams, mid-managers, and front-end people on how to use AI tools to automate their processes, which tools to learn, and how to learn them at scale and at speed. So if you need help, I'm happy to chat with you guys. Guys, let's hear it for our panelists. Thank you very much for your attention. Let's do a group selfie here. We're gonna do a selfie with you guys in it, and then we'll take a selfie from stage here. So
And if you have kids age 6 to 10, try out Cocoa Coders.
everybody, you guys are in the picture too.